what are the possible brain bases of the psychological mechanisms that mindfulness may touch? Well, attention, emotion regulation, self-view. Wonderful work by Mary Phillips, Helen Mayberg, and lots of neuroscientists are beginning to delineate where does emotional reactivity occur in the brain and emotion regulation. So in the context of a social situation that's feared, this could actually activate very quickly fear, arousal, anxiety. So we know that roughly, this is very condensed, but roughly there's the limbic and paralimbic system in which there's a whole set of brain regions that detect what's personally salient and even generate emotional reactivity. This sends a signal, bottom-up signal. This is threatening to me. This is dangerous to me. And it actually recruits activity in regulatory systems, many of which are instantiated in prefrontal cortex, parietal, that says, please select some strategies and engage in top-down regulation to either increase or decrease the current emotional state. So we literally are doing this consciously, non-consciously in our brain all the time. And these regulatory practices often are mediated by the way that we view ourselves and our skillfulness or lack of skillfulness in language, how we think, how we interpret, how we view ourselves. So here's just one task, for example, that we use. We present people with their own painful autobiographical social situations, like the one I read earlier. Then we present one negative belief at a time and have people spin on their own negative belief about themselves in that painful situation. Then we ask them to provide a rating. And then we've trained them to implement some kind of emotion regulation strategy. Attention focusing, here that was operationalized as when a cue comes on above your negative belief, please shift your attention to the physical sensation at the tip of the nose of the breath moving in and moving out. Physical, subtle sensation, shifting attention. We also have an attention distraction condition as a control, where we ask people, I put a 3-digit number and say count backwards by 1 from a 3-digit number, 168, 167, and so forth. Attention distraction. And then thirdly, cognitive reappraisal. Think in a way to reinterpret the meaning of the belief, to make it less toxic for yourself. 3 different strategies. There are many more than this. We only looked at these 3. So cutting to the chase, we found that post-mindfulness training, post-MBSR, we found that all 3 forms of emotion regulation, the ability to volitionally work with your psychology brain to down-regulate negative emotional reactivity. We found that the red bars are ratings of subjective ratings in the scanner of negative emotion to the negative beliefs. The blue bars are that same rating after doing self-talk or cognitive regulation, after doing attentional focus, and after doing distraction. All 3 methods were more efficacious after doing this 2-month training in mindfulness meditation. Greater skill in being able to identify emotions and to skillfully regulate them as needed. Just to go into a little more detail, attention is a very limited resource. We all know that. It's also that attention itself is not a unitary thing, but actually has many components. So 3 components here. Michael Posner is the superstar person in the field of attention. He's done incredible work on all levels, looking at from genetics to training kids in attention abilities. And here, he and his former student, who's a professor now, Jin Fan, they've developed a wonderful computer task that assesses 3 components. There are many more, but only 3 components of attention. Alerting, meaning the ability to sustain your vigilance on an object, to focus on an object. So you're coding. Can you keep your mind right on the object? You're meditating on the breath. Can I keep my mind right on the breath? Reorienting. When the mind becomes distracted, can I switch or shift my attention back to the object of meditation, back to the object of the work that I'm doing? Third is executive control. Selectively attending to what I want to focus on, actively inhibiting things that are task irrelevant. This is considered executive functioning or cognitive control or top-down control of attention. These 3, from alerting to reorienting to executive, literally develop in the brain over the first 2 decades of life progressively, such that kids really begin to develop executive control in their teens. So there's literally a developmental trajectory of these abilities in the mind-brain. These three components are instantiated in the brain in a distributed network of brain regions, which is really wonderful because that means we can probe the effect of attention training on the neural substrates of these components of attention. So do you find enhanced or decreased activity when people are more distracted, when they're more focused, when they've trained the muscle of attention, or at different ages, or on or off coffee, for example? Cutting to the chase here, the regions that are in these color circles are regions that we found to be, they're parts of the brain that were more active, that make up parts of this attention network from pre to post mindfulness training, in this case 15 adults with social anxiety. So meaning that these social phobics who engaged in the mindfulness meditation training, when challenged to regulate their attention, from pre to post training, they showed increased neural activity as well as behavioral indices of the ability to regulate their attention.